All right, everybody, welcome to this video. This is just a quick tutorial about my process for making sigils, my sigil algorithm. And yeah, I feel like I've been told by a lot of people that I do, quote, good sigils, whatever that means. And I thought I'd share my process. By no means do I think this is the process that you should follow. I don't even think that you should necessarily do sigils. Like, if you want to do them and you're interested in them, great. Here's a little window into how I go about it. But, I think that it's important not to take this as the way of doing it. So, anyway, let's get into it. So, what's the deal with them? What are they? Where do they come from? Why do you do them? Well, I'm not sure if he invented them, but Austin Osman Spare, the artist and chaos magician, definitely popularized them. And basically, the idea here is to, the way that I think of it at least, is to compress and encrypt a statement or some sort of thing that you want to be oriented towards, sort of like a result oriented statement, into a symbol of some sort that probably has like a little bit of an artsy flavor to it, and which you rendered with a process of your own design. And whether that's like, hand drawn, or if it's like you do a computer thing, you can look up sigil generator online and they'll generate it for you. But I think that this loses a little bit of the sort of like fun of it, and sort of like the getting yourself into a particular liminal state, which, that's, I think, the whole thing here. So I would say that the process should feel special to you, and you should also have it defined well enough that it's very quick and easy and doesn't require much of your decision making capabilities or bandwidth. So a few more notes on how I think about using them. I would say I'm definitely like a skeptic. I believe in science and empiricism, and I'm the type of person that talks about Bayesian this and that, Bayesian this and that as like a name drop. So in terms of epistemology, don't go off the deep end or anything, but I would say have a sort of psychedelic epistemology about it. You know, don't be too concerned with your rational self. Get a little bit weird, a little bit messy, a little bit chaotic. Um, I would just say that I also prefer to avoid being particularly precious about them. I like a system that gives me consistent output and is reliable and easy. And this is for the sake of making what's called a shoal, which we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, I just recommend making it sort of something you can bang out very quickly. So before we get into the actual creation process of sigils, my step 0 here is: do you actually know what you want? So let's say for a second that you wake up, you turn on the news, and some sort of famous scientist with a bunch of letters after his name or her name has said that sigils are now proven to work, and so you can feel good about doing them now. That science has backed them, and now you don't have to feel ridiculous doing them. So this is essentially like you have a situation of like a genie with infinite wishes that they will grant you. So my sense of this situation is that if this were to ever happen, then most people still would not make full use of it because they're, first of all, scared of low hanging fruit, and they don't know if they're allowed to. They don't actually know who they are or what they want. There's this whole motivated stopping thing. So um, maybe they do know what they want or who they are, but maybe they have to sweep it under the sort of neurological rug, as it were, because of some sort of trauma that's entangled with it or something. So step 0 is to just actually figure out what you want, and this is a reflective process that isn't as easy as it sounds. And if you do know what you want, and it's if you're just somebody that's yeah, I'm selfish, I know all the things that I want, you're gonna top out eventually. So don't worry about being some sort of neo-Randian, selfish, objectivist, crazed freak or anything and at the same time, don't spend that much time thinking about stuff at the expense of others. You should, whenever you can, be mutually enriching and, get yours and all, be as selfish as you need, but not at the expense of others. And I would also say that, you don't want to think about what you want for others. Uh, make this about you, don't make it about somebody else. Again, these are just kind of common, uh, you know, things to follow. This is not my guideline, but just kind of like a common sense thing. So step one. So this is going to be your statement of desire, and as you'll see soon enough, it doesn't even have to really be a statement necessarily, just something that you want to orient yourself toward in hopes of, just sort of being directed in that direction. So it's more about orientation than it is about an object, I'd say. But with your statement, you want to make it potent, dense, and direct. Don't beat around the bush. Don't waste time justifying why you want it or if you deserve it or anything like that. Like that's not chaos magic. Thinking about why you should have something. Think about just what you desire and what you are trying to get or whatever. And state as a positive. This is that thing of like, if you say don't think about the color blue, you're probably going to think about blue. That whole thing. So state it more as the thing that you want to have happen, and treat it as if it already has happened or is in your possession or is in existence or whatever. But with these two rules, like it's pretty big. These aren't crazy rules or anything to follow, but at the end of the day, don't be too precious. Again, just make the damn statement and get to the sigilling. So here's my example for this presentation. It's infinite bliss. This is like the way that my favorite sort of like subset of transhumanists likes to greet each other and sign off and all. And you'll notice it's not a statement. It's just an adjective and a noun. And so as you'll see, basically like with these I statements, the process actually gets rid of it already. Like if you say, I am this, most of that's going to just become this. And that's just because of the mechanics of how most people go about making sigils. But there's no need to say an I statement like I want this or I am infinite bliss, whatever. You aren't ordering lunch at Cafe Gratitude. So just orient yourself toward the thing that you're wanting to prioritize. That's the whole thing here. So next step is what I'm calling compression and encryption. Basically with this process, you just want to reduce it and sort of obscure it just so that you can sort of inject it into your subconscious mind. And the way that most people do this and that I do it with is to remove the vowels and remove the redundant letters and the redundant vowels as well. And so in this case of infinite bliss, you take out the I's, you take out the E's, etc. You take out the redundant N's, and you get this NFTBLS. And so I like to write it out in all caps, and then the next stage is to scramble it up into some sort of little symbol. So these, the following slide is going to be my mechanics of how I go about this. I think that it's important to just codify your own, and make it special to you, and make it straightforward. So I basically, for the rendering process, this is step 2.5, I like to reduce the remaining letters into a group of smaller components. So I have these 7 components. You have like vertical and horizontal lines, these diagonal lines that go to the left or the right. You have a C and a backward C, and you have an S. And yeah, you could combine the backwards and the forward C into the S, but I don't do that. Anyway, so with infinite bliss, like the N, NFTBLS would turn into this 2 vertical lines and 1 slanted line. Next one is F, that turns into vertical and 2 horizontal, and so on. So these are the final little components that you end up with, and you'll see how frequently they occurred. And so based on how well represented they are in this collection of components, basically like the least represented, like the least common component or components, I treat as the nucleus, if you will, or sort of like the central hub. And the more frequent the component, the more ornamental it gets. And so in this case, we have 1 S and 1 line slanted down to the right, and we have 4 horizontal lines and 6 vertical lines. So that gives you basically kind of like what is central and what is more ornamental. So this is what I ended up with, and a particularly keen eye might notice that there's no S or backward C's here. In fact, it's been rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. And I just did that because I thought that looked nice that way. I typically only rotate it when it's done. Otherwise, you kind of lose the whole point of having your orientation of backwards and forwards C's and this and that. So, yeah, I mean, at the point that you're done with it and you want to rotate it, like at that point you're getting towards the end, which is to start forgetting about what the whole thing was about and trying to like just leave it in your mind. So, rotate as you please. So step 4 is getting towards the end here. Is to basically do something with it, and I vote that you do whatever you want with it. And some people will tell you like strange things, like you should have sex and stare at the sigil the whole time. And I applaud anybody who does that for their coordination. And I don't know what type of partner they have that would think that's a reasonable way to go about things. But other people tell you to wear like fancy bespoke capes from some like shaman who has the authentication of 3 something or other. I don't know, stuff like this. And I would say just do the sigil and do what you want with it. You can ritualistically burn it if you want. You can destroy it, make sure that it was paper shredded to oblivion, or you can just keep it around and sort of forget about it. That's what I do. I'm not here to tell you what works best, though. Like some people might be worried about, oh, if you don't destroy it, then it's not going to come true. And I'm like, I'm not pulling apart fish bones here, like whatever, wishbones, I guess. What else was I going to say here? Yeah, that's it. Cool. So some additional stuff to get you going. If you're interested in this type of stuff and want to look into it a little bit deeper. First is this dude, Peter J. Carroll. He's written a number of books, sort of like the father of modern chaos magic, if you will. His website is specularium.org, and he has a blog post there that gives like a quick rundown of what he's all about, called Chaos Magic in a Nutshell. And other books that he's done that I like are like Liber Chaos, for instance, or Liber Null. Cyber Magic is like a weird one. The Octavo I haven't actually read, but I've heard great things. Liber Chaos is probably my favorite I've read. And so what I like about him is he uses like these kind of like equations, and like you can see on the sheet from Liber Chaos, his 3 equations of magic, and this like weird little graph thing here. And he also uses words like stochastic, which just really scratches an itch for me. So speaking of stochastic, he is written under the name Stochasticos as like a pseudonym, and this is the tripod of Stochasticos. And I'll do a video down the line about this because I think that's one of the sort of deeper insights in chaos magic, and I think that's a pretty insightful thing. So basically with this little net thing here, this tripod of Stochasticos, he has a model for how to get the most efficacy, or to like find the sweet spot for probability manipulation. And so probability manipulation is also, I think, just like the best way to think about this sort of woo-woo stuff, like the magic with an extra letter at the end type stuff. And so his way of talking probabilistically, I think, is a little bit more hip than some of these people that have these kind of ridiculous supernatural views about like shuffling tarot card decks the right way or whatever. Like I feel like it's largely about like the state of mind that you get into, and some of these practical mechanics. So he also talks about this like backward sigil, or he might call it like a retrocausal sigil or something. Sorry, I wrote PBJ, not PJC. I guess I was hungry. But my interpretation of this sort of retrocausal sigil thing is kind of along the lines of like, time is an illusion, and what's history and memory? It's like, memories are basically just like these neural architectures that are still in us. And so while you can't change the actual events of what happened in the past, you can definitely change your relationship to them and how you identify with them. And that's maybe just as good. Maybe it's better. So I would also say retrocausal is a fun sort of buzzword to throw around, and it makes you seem spicy to all your friends. So yeah, get into it. Some additional stuff. Gordon White, another chaos magic guy that I dig. He has the podcast and blog Rune Soup that a lot of people are into. His book, Chaos Protocols, Magical Techniques for Navigating the New Economic Reality, It's a pretty good one. He also has Starships. It's stylized as like star dot ships, and Pieces of Eight, which is a collection of essays on chaos magic. What I dig about Gordon is that he has a sort of like, I feel like he's somewhat cryptic at times and says stuff where I'm just like, I don't get it. He's really into like animism and all this, but I appreciate that he thinks about economics and like uh, isn't just like into the spooky stuff. He's like into the real world stuff, and interestingly, like he talks about Nassim Taleb or like Tyler Cowen with some regularity, which I'm sure most of the magical community, except for like the new age world, is like scared of having funds or whatever. Um, but yeah, anyway, so Rune Soup, good blog, good podcast. Check it out. Check out Chaos Protocols. Some concepts that he's talked about that I wanted to mention are, first of all, shoals. So this is an example of a shoal, and I sort of mentioned this earlier. Basically, a shoal is just a term for a bunch of fish swimming together, and so there's this implication of like, flock or school or herd or whatever, and so I mean, for me, this just means you make a bunch of sigils and you have a sort of sigilplex, and maybe sort of they increase the momentum. But also, it's just cool to have like a panel of a bunch of weird looking symbols. So that's how I think about it. He then goes a little bit further to talk about this idea of the robo fish. And there's a blog post he did called Magic Secrets as Taught by Robot Fish rather. And this is basically to include something that's a pretty high confidence prediction, like I'm going to eat spaghetti for dinner tonight. Something that you are very confident will happen, and kind of getting that initial success of the thing that's a sure thing. He feels might sort of help pull these other sigils, as if it's like a sigil herder or something like that. It's a little bit anthropomorphic for my taste, and in all honesty, I rarely use this technique. I just dig the shoals, and they seem to work nicely. But I thought I'd throw this out there because it's at least creative. So yeah, something to check out, and a worthwhile blog post to read. Anyway, that's how I go about sigils and how I think about them, and a little bit more stuff to ponder if you're into it. In conclusion, I would basically say that, while sigils are very effective, sometimes surprisingly or freakishly effective, like almost like scary effective, it's not about whether they actually work. This whole vibe of actually, like, don't be an actually person. That person sucks. So just have fun with it. Try to like use this as a way to get yourself in a different headspace that's maybe a little bit less, like, rationalist and picky and finicky or whatever. And don't take yourself too seriously doing it. Just have fun and enjoy the mildly liminal state of doodling around, making weird symbols that don't mean anything to anybody besides you. So anyway, that was my sigil video. Stay tuned for more on this type of stuff. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.